All right, thank you, Katie. Hi, everyone. This is Tad Johnson with JAMF Software. Thank you all for taking some time out of your day to join us and talk about mobile device management for iOS devices. Again, Tad Johnson with JAMF Software. I've been with JAMF now for about 3 years, and it's been an exciting 3 years. So what I'd like to do today is talk a little bit about some of the kind of brief history of iOS device management, talking a little bit about kind of what we've seen in the past few years as we've helped various customers with iOS management. Then we're going to talk about, more specifically, what the Casper Suite can do if you're looking to manage iOS devices. So this is where we get into some of the examples of managing these devices, of configuration, inventory, app distribution, etc. I'm going to have a combination of a few slides here to kind of set the background, provide some of the overview, and provide a little bit of the context of what we're going to talk about. And then I'm going to transition into a live demo of the Casper Suite product. And hopefully, if all the tech works out today, I'll be able to show you both what it looks like from an administrator's point of view, as well as what an end user would see on their iOS device that's being managed with the Casper Suite. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'd like to do is just give a little bit of background about JAMF Software and talk a little bit about kind of how we got into this business. So way back in the prehistoric days of 2002, JAMF Software was founded as a way to really bring enterprise quality tools to managing the Mac desktop system. Now, if you think back what was going on in 2002, this was a bit of an inflection point for Apple. Steve Jobs had recently returned. The older kind of beige boxes of the 90s were being phased out for more modern iMac, iBook, and the more modern form factor. The iPod had just been introduced, and iTunes was right on the horizon. So this was kind of the beginning of what we saw over the last 10 years of a really remarkable growth in Apple technology for both consumers and enterprise. So we started JAMF Software and the flagship product, the Casper Suite, as a tool for managing the Mac computers. When iOS 4 was released and Apple began introducing management capabilities to iOS devices, we found a natural fit. We included that iOS management capability with our product. So the idea there being, from one product, you can manage all your Apple devices. We started, and we still are headquartered in Minneapolis, Minnesota. That's where I'm calling in from today. And all of our support and development is across the river in Wisconsin, in the city of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, home to the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And that's where we get, a lot of talent coming out of the university there, and all of our support and development is, hosted in Eau Claire. We've also got a couple of remote offices, one in Cupertino for some obvious reasons, and one in New York City where we find a lot of customers. So hopefully we're close to you in one of those locations, and of course we've got field staff all over as well. So there's a little bit of background about JAMF Software, but really what I want to talk about today is how we can take the technology that we offer, some of the services that we offer, and really help you as enterprise customers succeed with the Apple platform. I think that it deserves to be said that Apple it's a different platform than what we're used to. The iOS device is not a BlackBerry, and it's not a Windows mobile phone, but hopefully today we can look at some of these examples and really feel comfortable at what's possible. So first, let's look at a little bit of a background of iOS devices, talk about the operating system, the devices themselves, and how we can manage apps. So as we know, the iOS device has gone through a few iterations from the initial iPhone that was introduced back in 2007. From there, we added the iPod Touch, a couple of revisions to the iPhone, the iPad that's now on its 3rd revision, and along the way we've seen the hardware getting faster, lighter, smaller, thinner. We've seen a lot of really impressive development just on the hardware front alone. With the operating system that's powering these devices, what initially started as the iPhone operating system went through a few revisions, version 1 and 2. As of version 3 of the iPhone operating system, this was the first time that any kind of enterprise features were added. That was the first time that you could connect your phone to Exchange, for example. With iOS 4, this was the first time that Apple really introduced true mobile device management capabilities with an MDM specification built right into the operating system. And with iOS 5, those released last year, this is where we're really kind of seeing the maturation of that technology. The Casper Suite and most MDM vendors can manage devices that are running iOS 4 or iOS 5. So as long as you have something that's remotely modern with iOS devices, those can be managed. But the hardware is very impressive. The operating system is very impressive. But I think that what really makes iOS devices so compelling, and what's powered a lot of the really remarkable growth in the number of these devices being used, both by consumers and in the enterprise, is the app layer. And what we've seen is the number of apps that are available through the iTunes App Store has just exploded. I think that that we passed 500,000 a while ago, and there's no sign of slowing down or stopping there. The really cool thing about the whole concept of the app is that you take this nice piece of hardware and you can completely change the entire experience of that device with a full screen app, fully touch sensitive, so you can have controls wherever they need to be. And what we've seen is a really wide variety of creative uses of this. So we've seen everything from books, magazines, content, movies and music, interactive learning, reference materials, of course games that are very popular there as well, and those are all possible with the same platform of iOS operating system and on top of the hardware. Taking it one step further from there, I think that one of the more exciting things we're seeing right now is, as we're helping customers with iOS devices, is seeing how you can further extend that with the integration of certain hardware pieces. So for anyone who's ever walked into an Apple retail store, you notice that there is no cash register, there's no front counter. Instead, each employee has an iPod Touch with a special sled attachment that allows them to perform transactions. They can scan a barcode from there, they can swipe a credit card, and they can actually do the full kind of checkout transaction straight from that device wherever they happen to be within the store. This is really powerful. This is really cool. We've seen similar things. Square is another company that's doing this. PayPal introduced a dongle that you can interact with their payment services. And in the case of, I think Bretford is the company that's making these carts and other stations for a shared use model, where you can imagine a doctor or a nurse, maybe a line worker for a factory, comes in for their shift, grabs an iPad or an iPod Touch off of the cart. The device is already configured with all the apps that they need to get their job done. They complete that. At the end of the shift, return it back to that cart. It's synced, it's charged, and it's ready for the next customer. So good examples here of how we can really extend this generic hardware component with apps and with targeted hardware. So a little bit of a background there of iOS, but the challenge here that we're going to solve today is, how do we manage these devices? So all this is great if we know that all these really fantastic workflows are possible. The key here becomes, how can we manage that? How can we be sure that the devices have the configurations they need, that they have the apps that they need, and that we're confident, based on the inventory reports that we have, that we know what's out there. So what we're going to look at here is first just the 10,000-foot view of what iOS device management really looks like. So as an administrator, if I'm going to be managing my devices, I can log in to the web console that's powering the Casper Suite. So I have any device with a browser, whether that's a Mac, a PC, an iPad, an iPhone, anything with a web browser, I can log in and access that management console. And I've got my network, and I've got a number of devices that I'm going to be managing. Again, these can be any iOS device running iOS 4 or iOS 5. This is where we introduce our software for the first time. So the centerpiece of the Casper Suite software is what we call the JAMF Software Server, or JSS. The JSS is the component that, as an administrator, I log into the web console, and for all the devices that I'm managing, this is how I'm able to contact those devices, and those devices are able to receive management commands. So anytime that an administrator wants to make a change, that change will be, they'll make the change through the web console, and then that will send a message out to the Apple Push Notification Service, or you might have seen that abbreviated APNS. And what this does is, this is a service that Apple runs globally that allows it to communicate with an iOS device wherever it happens to be. So the beauty of this system, and really the simplicity, is that without introducing any new apps on the device itself, just by virtue of running the iOS operating system, the Apple push notification service can communicate with that device, can find it wherever it happens to be in the world. It'll tell it to go and check in with its management server, and then we can complete whatever that task is. So I'd like to show this just to reflect that, for any of you that are familiar with the more standard desktop management practices, it's a little bit different just in that we have this extra piece, the Apple push notification service. But I'm happy to say, as of earlier this year, it's now free to use. You don't have to have a special account with Apple to use that. And it really makes this management a lot easier by being able to contact those wherever they are. So now we've kind of taken the 10,000-foot view. Let's drill in and just talk about some of the concepts that we're going to look at for iOS management. So a few of the pieces that we're going to want to keep as part of our toolkit, a lot of times we're going to use iTunes. Now this is the same iTunes that we use as consumers, but whenever we're managing an iOS device, we can use iTunes as a way to activate, backup, or restore an iOS device. Now, for anyone who's following Apple, you'll know that as of iOS version 5, all those tasks can also be accomplished straight from the device itself. But we like to use this, keep this in our toolkit as a way to make that management, backup, and restoration a little quicker. The Apple push notification service, this is what we just talked about. This is the protocol or the service that allows the devices to talk back to your mobile device management server. Now we use public key infrastructure, or PKI. This is how we establish trust so that the specific iOS device that you're managing can trust all the communication and all the messages that it receives from your management server. And that's where, this is where the JSS fills that role of the management server, allowing you to do all those key functionality of MDM, including app and ebook distribution, security management, configuration, and inventory. Now, a few other parts that are not required, but are optional and may be useful for certain workflows. Apple just released a tool called Apple Configurator that is a tool that can do a lot of the same tasks as iPhone configuration utility, or in some cases iTunes, with the benefit of being able to do 30 devices simultaneously. So for some customers, this makes a lot of sense. We can integrate with this tool. If you have Active Directory, Open Directory, Open LDAP, or any other LDAP-compatible directory service, you can tie this in with your management workflow so that you have the same common source of users, passwords, and groups to really make management a lot easier. Apple publishes all of their purchasing records through what they call the Global Service Exchange, or GSX. And if you have an account with GSX, you can actually retrieve all that warranty data, purchasing data, straight from Apple. The nice thing here is that because Apple's the original source for all of their devices, even if you're purchasing these devices through MacMall, Apple's still going to keep a record of when that warranty is going to expire so that you have that data directly from the manufacturer. And then any other services that you'd like to integrate as part of your management workflow can be tied in using the Casper Suite API, Application Programming Interface. It's a way that we can share data safely and securely between the Casper Suite system and other IT systems. Now one more slide here, and then we're going to jump right into the demo. Because iOS device management is a little different than what we're used to on the BlackBerry, it's a little different than Windows, it's even a little different than what we're used to on managing the Mac desktop. I always like to put this one out here just to help kind of reset some of our prejudices or biases for what management is supposed to look like. So you might be familiar with considering that we're just going to push everything out to the device. I'm going to push an app, I'm going to push some content. Based on the framework of iOS, we have to think of this as publishing. Certain things can be pushed, including configuration profiles and settings, but certain things require user interaction. So we like to think of this as publishing an app. I'm going to publish an app, a user can go in and install that. I'm going to publish an ebook or a PDF, and a user can go and retrieve that. The idea here making it very simple to get the right content in the hands of the users. Similarly, we can think of this more as encouraging rather than enforcing specific behavior. Because these are ultimately, personal devices that very portable. We know that they're often going home with users at the end of the day. We'd like to ensure that the user, we're not trying to fight the user, we're not trying to lock their hands, but instead we're encouraging them to use these devices for, in the most efficient way possible, giving them all the tools they need and all the resources they need to perform their job. We can get away from kind of this framework of trying to lock down the system. There are certain things that can be disabled or restricted, but by and large, the iOS device is an extremely safe platform. We don't need to worry about things like viruses. It's really not really feasible given the architecture of the iOS device. So we have to think of this more as how can we best grant access to the users so they can get to the data and the apps that they need. And finally, let's focus more on collaboration than on simply controlling. I think that Apple's done a really good job of this with taking a lot of the experiences that we're used to with our consumer devices and helping to kind of populate those within the enterprise. This has been really positive. We've seen a tremendous rise in the number of more consumer-friendly services, devices, technologies being used within the enterprise. Now, this doesn't mean that we're going to leave all of our email servers wide open and anyone can come in and check out what we're reading here. But what it means is that the focus should really be on providing a safe, easy way for users to access the data and the applications that they need. So with that, I'm going to do a little transition here, and I'm going to actually show you what this looks like. Now, as I'm going, I know that as we have questions coming in, you can use the Q&A panel. There's also a chat feature if you want to ask questions as I'm going here. I will take some time towards the end of the hour to make sure that we can address all of those, but please feel free to submit your questions as we're going along. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of orient on what does the Casper Suite, what does this look like from an administrator perspective. So I'm going to put my IT practitioner hat back on here, and now I'm going to log in to the Casper Suite web console as an administrator. Now the first thing I can do here, I'm going to look at my inventory. This will show me a quick list of all the devices that I'm managing with the Casper Suite. This is a way that I can gather, I can quickly run reports. I can do queries based on different attributes of the data, and if I want to see details on one of these devices, I can drill in there. For management, I have all my management options on the right side here. Now you'll notice there are as well options for computer management. This is where, for customers that are interested in managing the Mac, we'll use those other functionality. For the purpose of today, to keep this scope within iOS management, I'm just going to focus on the right side. So really the first thing that we want to think about when we are doing mobile device management is how are we going to associate our individual iOS device with our management server. And in the lexicon of iOS management, we call this enrollment. You can think of this as exchanging certificates or exchanging profiles with your management server. It's something that you have to do once per device, and then from that point on, all the additional management can be done over the air. So we look at mobile device enrollment. This is kind of the first thing we're going to look at. There's a couple of options of how we can accomplish this task. The first one being sending out an over-the-air invitation. So if I want to invite one of my users to enroll their device, the use case for this would be if users already have their iPads with them, they're already using their iPhones day to day. Maybe you have a distributed sales force that is not coming back into the office every day. Good option here would be to send an over-the-air invitation, and I can do that either by email addresses or by phone numbers. So it'll deliver it as an email or as an SMS. The idea there is that then the user just simply clicks on that link and proceeds from there. Another option is if, kind of the opposite of that one, if I've got a stack of iPads sitting in my office and I want to get all these prepped and ready for my next sales conference, what I can do is I can use this concept of an enrollment profile. I can download that from the JSS, load that into Apple Configurator or the iPhone configuration utility, and then actually plug in devices to a Mac running those tools and do that enrollment while it's tethered over USB. The advantage with this method, with the enrollment profile, it's a little bit quicker per device. There's fewer steps where I have to actually touch the device, but it does require, of course, that you've got all the iOS devices with you. With over-the-air enrollment, the benefit there is that it works great if users are spread wide and far. As long as they have their device with them and it's connected to the internet, they're ready to go. And the third option is just kind of a hybrid of the over-the-air enrollment, where instead of sending out an enrollment invitation, what I can do is just navigate to this URL. So that's what I'm going to use for this demo today. I'm going to do an enrollment by URL. And so that we can all see kind of what I'm looking at. Oops, there we go. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to put my iPad up on the screen. Now I know that WebEx has a little bit of a delay here, so I'm just going to pause and make sure that that's showing up for everyone. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Safari web browser, and I'm going to navigate to that URL. Now I already typed this in just to save a little bit of time, but this is where I can go to that URL. It's going to load this enrollment page. Now at this point, I'm being prompted with my username and password. Great example here where I can integrate this with my Active Directory system or my other LDAP compatible directory, so that I can just use my standard username and password that I have for all the other IT services offered by my company. But again, just to save a little bit of time, I made myself a shortened version of that. I'm going to log in with my MDM login and go from there. Now what this is going to do is this is going to contact my JSS server, and it's actually going to begin a process where it will exchange the certificate with that server and allow it to be managed. So a couple steps that I'm going to walk through. The first part, I'm installing a certificate. There we go. I know this is a little bit quick. If all these screens aren't showing up, that's not a problem. Basically, I'm clicking install OK on each of these steps. From there, I'm going to install my MDM profile, and that's the part that actually allows this device to be managed. So I'll go ahead and install. And it's important to note here that, again, anything that I'm adding through my management workflow after I've deployed this MDM profile can also be removed. So the nice thing here is that when we think about, how am I going to make sure that if an employee leaves the company, are they going to get all that content that they have on their iPad? Things like their email, contact, their VPN connection, their Wi-Fi settings, all of that can just as easily be removed if we're deploying it with MDM. So just finishing up here, and I think we're done. There we go. Enrollment is complete. So you can see there that took about 30 seconds or so from start to finish, not a terribly burdensome task. And as soon as I'm done, you'll notice that I've now got my first notification is sent out to me. This is telling me that I've got an app to install. The app is Evernote from the App Store. So I'm going to show you what this looks like, but for now I'm going to skip past that. All right. So now that the enrollment is complete, I'm just going to tap the home button and go back to my home screen. And now two more changes have automatically been set up with my device. The first one is I now have a passcode requirement. So I've set the requirement with my management system that any device that's being managed will have to have a passcode. This is just kind of basic iOS security 101. We always want to have a passcode applied to the device. As soon as I completed my enrollment, it's going to prompt me to set that passcode. Now I've got two options. I can either just set it right now, or I can defer it by hitting later. But you notice that I have up to 60 minutes. After that 60-minute time's out, the later button will go away. And the other part that has now been added is this self-service icon. The self-service icon, this is something that is automatically deployed to my device. I can, when we're deploying this for a customer, this is something that can be, you can use your own title. It doesn't have to be called self-service. And we encourage you to add your own logo as well. So instead of, the self-service with the Casper Suite icon, it can be the self-service with your company icon or another logo that your users are going to be familiar with. If I tap this, and as an end user, what this will show me is this will actually bring me to our self-service portal, where as a user, I have access to apps, both from the iTunes Store and in-house apps, ebooks, so I can actually download content here, and profiles. So when we think about kind of how we're going to deploy this and how we're going to get our users interacting with their devices, the self-service tool is a great asset to be used. So that's kind of the step there for how we get enrolled and what the user will see on that initial enrollment. Pretty easy stuff, and again, there's a couple of different options of how we're going to do that. Now I'm going to switch back here to Safari, and I'm going to resume my work here as an IT administrator. So now I'm back on the back end. I'm still logged into our web console, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to look at how do I configure my devices. So how do I ensure that the devices have all of the settings, the security settings, and the configurations that they need. So to do this, we're going to look at a concept or a package called a configuration profile. And if you've ever looked at iPhone configuration utility, this is going to look very familiar. What I can do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a new configuration profile. Now what this will do, I've got some options here. This is my demo test. Along the left side of the screen, you can see there's a number of different options for the configurations that I can set up. So I've got an option here for my passcode. I can set that requirement, ensuring that not only that a passcode is required, but ensuring that that passcode meets my complexity requirements that I've set forth. I can go in here, and if I needed to, if I decided as an organization that iCloud was not the appropriate use for my employees, I can just disable iCloud. With Wi-Fi, really common use case here, I can go in and actually provide both the Wi-Fi network name as well as the security details, so I don't have to hand that out to all my employees. I can keep that password secure and only provide access through my management framework. Now, same thing here. I think we're seeing a pattern here, but same concept. I can configure VPN, email or Exchange, LDAP for address books, calendars, subscribed calendars, web clips, credentials. So I've got a lot of options here that I can configure through my configuration profile. And any of the configuration profiles that I add here can be deployed over the air. So as long as my device has been enrolled, I can deploy this over the air to any of the devices that are being managed. So here I'm going to come into the Scope tab, and the Scope is telling me which devices I want to deploy this to. So I've got a couple options here. I can either just deploy this across the board, all devices are going to get this one, or I can use specific device groups, just individual devices if you're testing this, departments, buildings, or user groups coming in from your Active Directory or LDAP directory service. So you can begin to imagine how if the finance organization has some slightly different requirements than the IT organization, which has different requirements than the sales organization, I can begin to differentiate the experience for each of those different settings based on these configuration profiles. And I think I just saw a question come in. What we're looking at here, how does this differ from Configurator from Apple? The big difference here is that I can apply these settings over the air. So I don't have to actually synchronize my device. I don't have to plug that back into Configurator if I'm going to update this. The beauty of mobile device management is that as long as the device is powered on, and as long as it's connected to some network, I can continuously be updating these and receiving updates from the device. So if I go back a step here, just a few examples. The passcode requirement, so when I initially enrolled and you saw that my device prompted me to set a passcode, that's because in here I've defined that I'm going to require a passcode, and I'm going to apply this to all my devices. So now just like that, this was a task that took me all of 30 seconds, Any device that now enrolls with my iOS management profile will automatically have that passcode requirement applied.